Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Westminster Group review of results for 2020 and update on prospects. To start with, if we could cover a couple of housekeeping items. Before we begin, we would like to submit the following poll, which you will see on your screens. Throughout this presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. However, questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time via the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen, or if anyone has dialed in via westminster@walbrookpr.com. We will endeavour to answer all questions today. However, failing that, the company will review all questions submitted and publish responses where appropriate. These will be available via your Investor Meet Company dashboard. Finally, we would like to remind you that this presentation is being recorded. I would now like to hand you over to Chief Executive Peter Fowler and Chief Financial Officer Mark Hughes.
Thanks, Tom, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for attending our presentation this afternoon on our 2020 results and our future prospects. As Tom said, my name's Peter Fowler. I'm the founder and CEO of Westminster, and our excellent CFO, Mark Hughes, joining me this afternoon, will walk you through the numbers later. Next slide, Tom. Thank you. We thought as there's going to be a number of potential investors and investors on the call that may not know too much about Westminster, we'll just do a quick overview of who we are and what we're doing before we get to the results. So first of all, who are we? We're a global security and managed services business delivering niche products and services with a particular focus on high growth and emerging markets around the world. And our client base is predominantly governments and government agencies, critical infrastructure such as ports, airports, borders, etc., and large commercial organizations worldwide. And we've developed a multiple revenue stream business model, building a substantial recurring revenue stream from long-term contracts, and I'll go into more of this as we go through the presentation. And we're focused on three core sectors: land, sea, and air. Next slide, Tom. So over the years, we've built a fairly comprehensive global footprint. We have offices in the UK, it's our head office, obviously. We've offices in France, Germany, Sierra Leone, and recently in Saudi Arabia. And these are supported by a network of agents and partners in over 50 countries, which give us a very cost-effective global presence. Next slide, Tom. One of the strengths of our business is that we've developed this multi-level revenue stream from multiple sources in multiple jurisdictions around the world, which do give us resilience to world events and quite frankly has been significantly important to us during the COVID pandemic of 2020 and helped us pretty well robustly get through the process. As you can see, we have a number of revenue streams, very much complementary. The one that I will mention and talk about is the managed services section in the services division there. This is where we are providing long-term 10, 20-year recurring revenue contracts, such as running airports and ports and so forth. And given that these contracts are all multi-million pound revenue per annum, you can see how as we start to deliver on these projects, we're going to be seeing step changes in growth. And you'll see more of that as we go through the presentation. Next slide, Tom. As I say, we're focused on three core sectors, providing security solutions in these three sectors. Each one of these, of course, is huge in their own right. And we only need to capture small market shares in each of these areas to have a very substantial business. Next slide, Tom. So moving on to our 2020 review. Next slide, Tom. Obviously, the overriding issue for 2020 has been the COVID pandemic, and I think, quite frankly, that we've managed to weather that quite well. Not least because I think we were agile in taking early action and planning for it. And of course, the multiple revenue stream business model that I mentioned equally was important. So whilst parts of our business, such as our aviation business, was heavily impacted, other areas of our business, our product sales, our port security operations, continued to do quite well. In H1, we had a very successful period, 24% up on H1 2019. That's following on from the previous 3 years of double-digit percentage revenue growth that we'd been delivering. We were profitable at pre-tax level. Our airport operations were running at record revenues for the first 2 months of the year. Our Ghana port operations was delivering good business. We delivered an Asian port screening project. Our product sales were building, and generally we had a fairly impressive H1. And I think that is an indication, quite frankly, of where the business had got to. And if COVID had not taken place, then I think the whole of 2020 would have been quite an interesting year. As it was, H2 was more impacted, of course. COVID was having a greater impact in terms of travel restrictions and causing delays in the signing and delivery of some of our contracts. An example of that is the Palace of Westminster project, which was supposed to be signed in sort of March, April last year and delivered during 2020. As it wasn't signed till September. And we weren't then able to actually commence work on the project. We've eventually managed to start in April of this year. So impacted H2, but nevertheless, I still think we had a pretty robust performance in 2020. It was a busy year. We secured important new business. We created further new opportunities, and we carried out a number of strategic advancements. Next slide, Tom. So in terms of contract delivery, what did we secure? Well, we delivered products and services to 78 countries across 6 continents. I think that's pretty impressive in performance given what was going on in the world. We successfully completed a 665,000 contract to supply screening equipment to a global investment management company's 85 offices in 37 countries, and you can imagine the logistical challenges that presented, and we very successfully delivered on that. We delivered the second port screening project in Asia that the contract we secured in 2019. We secured the £1.5 million 5-year contract to provide security screening and other security services to the Palace of Westminster. That was a significant contract win and an endorsement of our business. Towards the end of the year, we secured a £750,000 3-year guarding contract for one of the UK's leading house builders. I think that bodes well for the next period that our garden operations are operating. And we successfully completed a contract at short notice to repatriate 80 NGO staff stranded in Africa. And the reason I mention that is that contract was actually secured by one of the world's largest security groups, who actually then turned to Westminster to actually perform it. They couldn't do it quick enough themselves, and we very successfully did that at short notice. So all of that, I think, is a good demonstration that we were very successfully and active during the period. Next slide, Tom. But in terms of our strategic activity, we were also very busy. We kept all our people safe and employed. We expanded our inventory and our marketing. We brought on new products, new marketing staff. We even went through a UK TV advertising campaign. All of this helped to build our business and keep our business going during the pandemic. We rebranded our very diverse businesses under the Westminster brand. We've had this one company, one vision approach ethos, and that was a significant step forward. We launched our new online training catalogue. We see online non-contact sale training actually being quite an important aspect going forward, and there's more work on that and software programs being delivered there. We signed a strategic alliance with JP International Training, expanding our various training capabilities. And of course, we repaid all of our convertible loan notes out of the placing we did in December. So strategically, I think we made a number of steps forward. Next slide, Tom. So moving into our financials, I'll hand over to Mark to run us through the numbers.
Thanks very much, Peter. Next slide, please, Tom. Right, well, turnover of 10 million was resilient despite COVID-19, and this was mainly helped by the multiple business streams that Peter was already talked about. It's true, it would have been better without COVID, but it was still a great move forward. Despite the lower turnover, the loss reduced, as did the EPS loss. And you'll see there's a bit of a restatement. The figures before the policy change would have been a loss of 1.4 million and an EPS loss of 1.02 pence per share last year. So even with that getting better, we did a lot better than the previous year. Next slide, please, Tom. This just splits it between the various segments. The technology did a lot better than 2020 because of product sales. Services were down primarily because the West African airport closure and the travel restrictions which affected our training and guarding. This was somewhat offset though by the Ghana sales. Overall, we had better margins. That's because a lot of these increased sales in technology were at the higher 25% plus level, whereas we had no big solution sales, which tend to be at around 15%. The finance cost was zero last year, primarily because of the function of accounting as the CLN unwound itself and the reserves that were taken were released. Okay, next slide, please, Tom. I think this really speaks for itself. We entered 2021 debt-free. I say debt-free, there is a very little number there because of the IFRS 16 leases, but it's immaterial. And we had cash of 2.1 million at the year end. We're looking forward to a cash saving of about £300,000 in interest costs this year. Next slide, please, Tom. So following 3 years of double-digit percentage growth in revenue, 2020 still produced a robust, albeit slightly reduced result, and the trend continues on an upward trajectory, as you can see from this slide. Next slide. I wanted to put this one in because we talk about operationally geared, that we are very operationally geared. We're a very scalable business. We could do at least 5 more managed services projects with little or no need to increase administration expenses. And I suspect we could do even more than that if we wanted to. Now, managed services projects tend to be higher margin, so all that gross margin should drop to the bottom line for the most part. And therefore, profits from this incremental growth will outpace cost all the way through. Next slide, please. We've talked a little bit about our geographical diversity with 78 countries. This sort of splits it down, and you can see that not only do we serve a lot of countries, we actually spread what we do over a lot of areas. And the one point there is I would expect the Middle East, which is only 5%, to have a higher share in the future as Westminster Arabia comes on screen. Next slide, please, Tom. Right, can I hand back to Peter to finish off?
Thanks, Mark. Next slide, Tom. Okay, so past trading is important, of course, and I think we demonstrated that we did a fairly robust performance in 2020. But of course, what's even more important is what's our current trading and our outlook. Obviously, without question, COVID has still impacted the beginning of 2021. We've still seen travel restrictions and delays. That said, we're still pretty bullish about 21 and the outturn for the year. We've commenced the year debt-free. That's a positive. We have now commenced work on the Palace of Westminster project. As I mentioned, has been delayed from last year. There are encouraging signs of recovery in both our guarding and our training businesses. Recent new contract awards, and I mentioned the £750,000 training contract, guarding contract that we secured at the end of last year, and there are some other interesting contract awards I hope to announce in the near future. We are developing new opportunities and initiatives, a case in point being the COVID testing program. I'm sure everybody understands and is aware how important COVID testing is at the moment, and I think will be for quite some time. And we did announce in an update some weeks ago that we'd entered into an exclusive arrangement on an innovative COVID testing program. One of the problems with COVID testing is it needs to be verified. It needs to be certified. So if you're doing COVID testing at home, how do you know it's been done properly? How do you know it's been that actual person who took the test and so forth? So you may have noticed that the scheme was actually launched this week. We've got news items on our website. The company we entered into an agreement with is called Certific. It's a joint arrangement between UK and European operations. It involves clinicians and labs and various software enterprises. And our role within this scheme is to provide the verification services. Too early to say at this stage on scale. It's only launched this week, but you can imagine the opportunity is quite enormous. And I think it demonstrates, how flexible and innovative as a company we can be. And of course, we've continued to supply products and solutions to clients around the world in the last few months. Next slide, Tom. In terms of our airport operations, this is important to us, of course. It's one of these long-term 15-year contracts. We've still got 7 odd years to go before renewal. But what is encouraging is, despite the fact that it was heavily impacted during 2020, as you can see, it was totally closed for a number of months, but it's actually recovering well. We're now just 37% down, and it's performing better, not only than our expectations, but it's performing better than the average of African airports and European airports. So that is an encouraging sign, and if that trend continues, it will be very helpful to us. Next slide, Tom. In terms of our port operations in Ghana, as I've mentioned, the operations during 2020 were not really impacted by COVID. Unlike the airports, this is another long-term managed services contract, 5-year contract, extendable. In fact, in 2020, our revenues were higher than they were in 2019 on a month-by-month basis. So you can see that the operation was growing. It's a high-margin business, and it was not only robust through COVID, but we've continued to see growth. So as you can see in the chart here, we are some sort of 20-odd% up month on month against the previous year. So pretty impressive operation. Every bit the excellent contract we said it would be. And importantly, a fourth berth at the port is due to open later this year, which will further extend the capacity. So encouraging news on the port operations. Next slide. So also encouragingly, going forward, not just for this year, but for the future, all our large-scale project opportunities remain live, including the African Managed Services Airport project, and I'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. But the fact that all of these projects remain live is very encouraging. We're also seeing encouraging signs of other delayed projects and opportunities are once again moving. Our inquiry levels remain healthy, bodes well for the future. Some of you, or many of you, I suspect, may be aware that back in 2018, we signed a 15-year contract for Tehran International Airport, very much with the support of the British government. Another long-term managed services project, worth to us at the time 24 million euros per year, so a very significant contract. It took us a couple of years of negotiation. It was a tremendous achievement. But then President Trump decided to pull the US out of the JCPOA agreement. And of course, as everybody knows, sanctions were reimposed and we had to put the project on hold. There are certainly encouraging signs that the US and Iran relations may be improving. We have to watch these developments carefully, of course. But should they return, or should some form of JCPOA return, then I think we would be in a very good position to move forward. Remember, Iran has been out of the mainstream now for quite a number of years. They have 60-odd airports in the country. All of them need significant security improvements, and so, you know, watch this space really. Time will tell. And of course, importantly, at this moment in time, this is still our view. We still expect to meet our 21 market expectations. We have to acknowledge there's still uncertainty in the market. Of course, there is. Our business is an international business, so it doesn't just matter what happens in the UK. It depends on what happens around the world. But from what we're seeing and the visibility we've got at the moment, if things continue on the same trajectory, we're feeling pretty bullish. Next slide, Tom. We've put this slide up really just to give you an indication of some of the large-scale projects, both within our services division and our technology division that we're working on. If we take the services division, this is just a small number of the airport and port projects, long-term, as I say, 10, 15, 20-year projects that we're operating, or we're looking to pursue, or in the process of pursuing. The one at the top there, the five airports in an African country. Many of you will know that that's been on the cusp for a while. Frustratingly, COVID travel restrictions and disruptions to government departments, have sort of delayed matters there. And obviously, there's never certainty in life, but we are very confident that that's likely to move forward. we're not saying for 1 minute that we're going to win all of the contracts that we're showing on the screen here. But remember, each one of these is a multi-million pound per annum contract. So it doesn't take many of them, and there's many more in the background to make very significant step changes in our business. And on the technology division, this is just a very small snapshot of some of the large-scale projects that we've been working on. All of them are 1 million or more in size. Some of these we expected to win last year and got delayed because companies, as you can imagine, were delaying their expenditure. And when I said earlier on, some of the we're seeing some encouraging signs that projects are once again moving forward. So we do expect to see some movement on some of these. So all in all, an encouraging picture, a lot for us to work towards. Our African airport operation, 5 airport operation, is very much alive. I know that's a concern to many. And believe me, nobody wants to secure and announce that contract more than me. So hopefully we'll have news in the near future. Next slide, Tom. In terms of future growth, clearly we've got 3 very significant ways of growing our business organically, and as I've been talking about, huge growth potential through our particularly through our managed services business, where we're going to be bolting on these multi-million pound, multi-year contracts together with all our other revenue streams that we're building. So I think we have very significant organic growth. Strategic alliances. Now, over the last 2 or 3 years, we've announced some really interesting strategic alliances, and I can see us continuing to do that. It's a way of certainly expanding our operations and market and worldwide presence cost effectively. So I think that's an area that certainly we're going to continue to do. And in due course, we do see further acquisitions being part of our growth story. We have already undertaken a couple of very successful acquisitions. The guarding business is one that's now growing within our organization quite well. And last year, or the year before, we secured an acquisition of a French company called Euroops. And that's been very instrumental in opening up Francophone Africa for us. And indeed, some of those opportunities I showed on the previous slide are a direct result of that acquisition. So lots of growth opportunity in lots of different ways for the business. I think we're really developing a solid business to move forward from. And myself and the board are very excited about our future. Next slide, Tom. I think you'll forgive me from saying I'm proud that actually our achievements and the quality of our services is being recognised quite widely. In May last year, and again actually in April 21, our aviation security training operations were graded as outstanding in all areas audited by the UK Civil Aviation Authority. This is a very robust examination, and it does matter. It matters enormously in terms of our training operations both in the UK and around the world to have this accreditation. And you can count on one hand and almost on one finger the number of companies that have been graded at that level. So that's a significant achievement for our training business. In November last year, we were recognised by the London Stock Exchange as one of the select 1,000 companies to inspire Britain. Not a bad accolade to have. And then in April, just 2 or 3 weeks ago, you will have seen that we were granted the Queen's Award for Enterprise in recognition of outstanding achievement in international trade. That's what it says on the citation. And I'm very proud of that. and I think it's an honour for the company, not just for the company, but of course for our employees who've done a superb job in helping us build that business. So I'm very proud of those achievements. I think it's good for the company, it's good for our shareholders, and it stands us in good stead, as we continue to grow. Next slide, Tom. Okay, I'm not going to focus too much on this, but I did just want to mention we do have our own charity. It's part of our corporate social responsibility. It's not about money. It's about supporting the communities in which we operate. And over the years, we've done numerous things to assist the communities in which we operate. During the COVID pandemic, we supported the local community around Lungi, who were heavily hit because the airport had been closed. We provided rice and commodities, water to the community. I think it was morally the right thing to do. We've built schools, we've built toilets, we've established clean water supplies, we've helped organized twinning between European and African schools. There's a whole host of things that we've been doing over the years, and particularly last year to assist the communities in which we operate. And I think it's a good thing as a company that we do this sort of thing as well. If you want to know more about that, then the website's on the screen there. Okay, so that wraps up from me, Tom.
Great, super. All right, well, look, thank you, Peter. Thank you, Mark. Now, if we could turn to the questions. We've had a number of questions that were submitted ahead of the presentation. However, please do continue to submit your questions using the Q&A tab situated on the top right-hand corner of your screen. I would like to remind you that a recording of this presentation, along with a copy of the slides and published Q&A, can be accessed via your Investor Meet Company dashboard, which will be available after the presentation. Additionally, your feedback is important to the company, so immediately after the presentation has ended, you'll be redirected for the opportunity to provide feedback. While you're submitting questions, let us first have a look at some of those submitted ahead of the event. There were a number that were submitted in respect of the Iran prospect and also the 5-airport Africa prospect, and a number of them duplicated. So we're not going to read those out individually. We did cover those extensively within the presentation, but a couple of quick points, Peter, if I could put to you that were distinct in a couple of those questions that I think might help just sharpen that slightly. In respect of Iran, have you had direct contact with Iran? And the second question on that topic is, if the contract were to be put in place and the US were to subsequently leave the JCPOA again and reimpose sanctions, would the Iranian Westminster project still be legal or viable? I wonder if you could just sharpen those 2 points for us.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so taking the first point, are we in direct contact with Iran? The answer is yes, but obviously you wouldn't expect me to be too specific about that. But yes, of course, we are. And, we are monitoring the situation. We are in touch with our counterparts and our agents and all interested parties. And that includes, I have to say, the local British embassy in Tehran that has been enormously helpful to us and enormously supportive. On the second point, in terms of sanctions, clearly where sanctions are imposed, either on entities or on countries or whatever, we have to abide by those sanctions. So that's the first point. Secondly, our contracts do cover eventualities such as imposition of sanctions and what happens and what payments need to be made and so forth. So that is covered. And thirdly, and I think it's an important point, I don't think we would re-enter into a contract if it was likely that sanctions were to be reimposed. And you can never foresee the future, but I certainly wouldn't expect to be entering into a contract. Should we do so? I'm not saying for 1 minute that that's happening, but it could do. But we would look at it very closely. We would look at it closely, not just with ourselves, but with our advisors, with the British Embassy and the UK government and so forth. And so we would be entering into things with our eyes open. But as I say, our contracts deal with it anyway.
Great. Okay. That's super. Thank you. And the five airport Africa prospect, I think we've covered that. So one other question on Saudi Arabia. Now that Westminster Arabia has been established, are they working on port projects? I think pre-COVID, they were doing some risk assessments, which they hope may result in further Tamar-like MSC business.
Yes, I think as we've said in our annual report and in various updates, we see KSA being an important part of our business, quite frankly, moving forward. It's frustrating, like everything else around the world. COVID has had an impact out there. In fact, they've still got travel restrictions within KSA. So it has delayed things. It has, even to the point of getting licenses to do various things and various services have been delayed. But it's a delay, it's not a cancellation. It's, the port is very much, or the ports are very much part of our business plan. Yes, we're in contact with them. Yes, we think that's going to be a potential large scale opportunity for us. But there are many others in Saudi Arabia that we are pursuing. So to answer your question, absolutely. We're not working on it yet. We're not able to, and we're not able to go there. But it's very much on the cards that that's part of what we're doing. And incidentally, just sort of picking up the Iran discussion earlier on, it's not just the US and the Iran negotiations that are important. The KSA and Iranian discussions that have been recently taking place to try and thaw the relationship or improve the relationship between those two is also extremely encouraging for obvious reasons.
Super. Okay, great. We've had a couple of questions that have been COVID testing related. If I can put this one to you, on what basis will Westminster earn money from the new relationship with Certific?
Okay, so clearly I've got to be cautious about commercial sensitivities and so forth, but basically you could. Our role, as I mentioned in the presentation, is around the verification side of things, the screening verification. I can't go into too much more detail than that. But you could look at it as a bit like our managed services projects, if you like. It's a per user type fee. So the more COVID tests that go through the scheme, the more we'll get paid. So it's very much akin, if you like, to an airport where we're getting paid per passenger, or a container port where we're being paid per container going through. We're being paid per COVID test being undertaken. As I said, the scale of this is too early to tell. There are numbers being bandied around about thousands a day being done. So if it happens, there will be a big smile on my face and hopefully most of the investors. But this is still early days.
Great. Okay. Now we've got a couple of questions that are in respect of forecasts and expectations, and I'm going to pick this one out because I think it covers the majority of them, and we might make this our last question. Westminster has reaffirmed that it expects to meet market expectations at the revenue and PBT level, with the caveat being that it's contingent on expected contract wins. If those expected contract wins don't materialise, can Westminster break even for 2021 based on the implied direction of travel of the business year to date? Okay,
good question in a way, but slightly difficult to answer, depending on what happens in the year. But can I answer it this way? If we look back at H1 2020, we were very profitable at pre-tax level, without any large-scale new contract wins. So assuming that recovery continues on the same trajectory or better, and our run rate business continues, and our guarding and our training all recover, as we hope they will in the next few weeks and months, then I think the answer is yes. But there's a big caveat there, isn't there? It depends if recovery is slower, if the world changes again. Again, as I mentioned, we're international, so it's not just what's happening here; it's what's happening elsewhere in the world. That can impact us. So if we got back to pre-COVID level run rate business, absolutely very profitable. But I'm not sure we're going to get there on all of our operations this year. But we'll see. But I think it's a good trajectory. Having said that, certainly my hope and frankly my expectation is that we will secure at least one more of these large scale projects, if not more, this year. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, super. All right, that's very clear. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Mark, for updating everyone today. Could I ask investors not to close this session, as you will now be automatically redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback. If anyone has further questions or would like additional information on Westminster, please do get in touch via westminster@walbrookpr.com. In the meantime, thank you for attending today's presentation. We look forward to updating you again soon.